Welcome to the Skills First Beginner Workshop for Developing Your Enterprising Skills. I'm Kathleen Webb, the founder and president of Skill Squirrel. Today is session number 10, which marks our last session in this series. The topic today is basic research through surveys. Surveys help to improve your understanding of your market's needs and wants. If you don't ask the right questions or have the right flow in your surveys, you won't get the data that you're looking for. Stay tuned to hear from our presenter, Vern Vautour from Biz Coach Services, on how you can create better surveys to obtain the data you need for your business planning needs. Vern has extensive experience providing small business coaching, training, and consulting, and it has been my pleasure for Skill Squirrel to host this series for Biz Coach Services. Now, over to you, Vern.
Thank you, Kathleen. Today's topic is business research and surveys. Now, it's interesting that we're always potentially doing surveys with our customers no matter what. So one of the things that you have to remember is that there are formal ways of doing surveys and there's informal ways of doing surveys. So today we're going to actually talk about that, and we'll go through a few exercises and samples, etc. So there is nothing more important than understanding your market and your customers. Surveys are sure ways to improve your understanding of your market and of your customers and what your customers actually want and need. However, asking the right questions and having the right flow in your surveying is quintessential in getting the data that you're looking for. So in this workshop, we'll cover the value of good surveys, basic types for matching audiences, examples, tips, and more. So according to MailChimp, survey questionnaires provide valuable insight into demographics and potential target markets that you want to appeal to, as well as current customers who use your products or website. So in this slide here, I do a lot of surveys. I help a lot of companies set surveys up, especially small business. So some of the types of surveys that I get involved in are customer or end user groups or needs analysis, buyer and supplier research. By the way, a lot of people don't realize that you have to, when you're looking for buyers, you actually need to research them as well. And you should have questionnaires and or surveys to follow through with them. Research analysis regarding competition, consumer groups, especially like product and prototype development, customer satisfaction surveys, and consumer qualification and interest surveys. So I'm just going to go through to SurveyMonkey just for a moment, just to show you. So what I've done is I've logged into SurveyMonkey. I'm using the free version. It's pretty basic, but there are lots of different templates that one can use. And here's a sample of templates and different topics. As you can see, there's many, there's hundreds of different templates you can use. So one of the ones that I use the most is the customer behavior survey template. There's target market, website design feedback, customer satisfaction. There are lots of different ones. There's different forms you can use, as well as surveys on human resources, customer feedback, general business. There's all kinds of different forms, marketing, education, benchmark surveys, academic research, quizzes, services, community-based surveys, healthcare surveys, industry-specific, different forms, political, demographics, not-for-profit, just to name a few. So there's, as you can see, a lot of these survey websites have a very robust offerings. So one of the things that I'll just show you, this one here will give you a really clear or easy, simple survey. Because it's a basic, there are a lot of limitations, and SurveyMonkey is not my favorite. It used to be my go-to, but they've really put a lot of limiting factors in. And I used to have a paid subscription, but it was only $6 or $8 a month in the early 2000s. Now it's like $35 a month. I don't really use it that often, so I don't want to spend that much money per month. So anyway, just for example, there's a customer satisfaction template. Let's just press that, and I'll walk you through a few questions. So you can see that there are different kinds of questions. So this is a ranking question. How likely would you recommend this company to a college or a friend? So basically pick a number. Overall, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with the company? So again, like when you get a template, you can download the template, and you can just use the type of question, change the wording, change the answers, and you can collect data that way. Very useful, by the way. So let's say I'm very satisfied with the company. So this is what I call a single answer question, right? I can only answer one thing, not multiple. The next one, which of the following words would you use to describe our products? Select all that apply. So it's reliable, high quality, useful, and unique. So I can select as many as I want. So that's a multiple choice question. How well do our products meet your needs? So again, it's a single choice. How would you rate the quality of the product? Very high. How would you rate the value for the money? Let's say above average. How responsive? So these are all one-word answers. So how responsive have you been about your questions? There's 10 questions that you're allowed to have in the free account, and they're basic questions. The problem is that I can't do knockouts. I can't ask a question, and if they answer a certain way, it goes to a different question. So I don't have logic. That's the only disadvantage. But having said that, I can survey up to 10 questions, and I can get up to, I think, 50 or 100 responses. So for a small business, self-employed, it can be a really good little tool to use. How long have you been a customer of our company? So this is my first purchase, less than 6 months. So you can get some really good feedback if you know what questions to ask, right? How likely are you to purchase our products again? Potentially very likely. Or maybe what you do is you say not so likely. Now, the problem is that in this case, you don't have that logic. If you did have logic, if you had the paid account at $35 a month, you could go not so likely, and then it would actually ask you, well, why do you feel that way, right? So you end up flowing your questions, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And like I said, I'm going to show you another survey company that offers software, and it has a really robust free account system. And then, do you have any other comments? And then you're done. So ultimately, what happens is you've now done a survey, and this is how you set it up. You've got templates you can use. You've got all kinds of pre-made templates. You can modify them all you want for the most part, but there are the basic ones for the free account. So I find surveys can be, and this is just an introduction. I wanted to introduce you to the world of surveys. Nowadays, everything's pretty well gone online. But on the other hand, when we look at the different ways you can do surveys, so we can actually do surveys online. We can do on paper. So you probably have gone through the mall and you see somebody standing around with a clipboard, and they might be doing surveys on paper, right? Then there's also mail. Sometimes you'll get an email or a mail, and you'll be asked questions. For example, the famous one is the census that we have to do every 4 years. So that's a survey in itself. There's also telephone surveys, in-person surveys. We have panel groups, focus groups that you can actually, in some cases, you can be paid to be a focus or a panel group participant. And sampling, also post calls. So sometimes you might deliver a service and you do a follow-up call. Again, that's a survey. And then focus groups, like I mentioned. So the point is that you need to have a good blend of yes, you can do formal surveys, but being informal, surveys work all the time. You should always be questioning, or rather, you should always be surveying your clients no matter what. Like, for example, if somebody calls my business, the first thing I'm going to do, and I even record this, I'll record, I've got a form. I have the name of the client that calls. I get their email. I get their phone number. I figure out what the nature of the call is. And the most important thing on the last column is I ask them a simple question: how did you hear about us? Or how did you get our number? Guess what? That's a one question survey, but at least you're tapped into understanding and getting to understand your clients better, because you want to create relationships with your clients. This is from Question Pro. Actually, there's hundreds of software companies that do quizzes. I'm going to show you just an example of 270. I won't go through them, but I'll show you where the guide is, and I'll show you how that works. But Question Pro is one of them. They're one of the better ones. And so basically, I use this little table from them that basically says, okay, well, what are the characteristics of a survey? So you really need to start out with, what is it that I'm looking for? What do we need to determine? What's my hypothesis? In a later slide, I'll go over that as well. So we need to learn to ask the right questions. We have to use skip logic and flow. That is actually better than just a basic survey. But if I ask you, where'd you get my number? That's a one question. There's no skip logic and flow on that. But I am tracking it. I am recording it, and I'm trying to figure out, what are my customers buying into? And then you have to determine the survey method. And we just went over a bunch of different ones. And then you collect your data. But once you have your data, how are you going to interpret it? How are you going to find it useful? So it's very important to sit down and figure out, okay, well, let's figure out why we want the information. And then we have to understand a couple of things. So I'll just go over the sales process, because at the end of the day, we have to sell product, or we have to sell services, period, right? So we have to understand the sales process. So this is an interesting take on surveys, okay? So if you look at the sales process, the Canadian Professional Sales Association tells us that it takes on average 4.1 approaches to make a sale. So here's the steps, right? So if you understand the sales process, the first thing we need to do is we need to gather information. Maybe we call up a company to find out, to get the contact information, to find out who the people are to speak to, like who are the stakeholders that I need to be speaking to. Well, guess what? There's a survey, right? You have to have some questions to ask. So there's survey number one. When I actually go back to speak to the stakeholders and the decision makers, again, I have my second round of survey questions. So now all of a sudden in the sales process, I already need two surveys. Then when I make a proposal, I have to make sure that as I'm proposing, I'm getting feedback along the way. And then when I close, I have to look after all the details of closing the sales, the contract, setting up the deposits and payments, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I've got another formal or informal survey that I'm conducting. So we use surveys, whether we like it or not, all the time. And so what we want to do is make sure that when we grow our business, that we have processes, we have procedures, and we kind of follow it for each and every customer. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in the development process, I need to decide or define my target audience. So if I'm going to design or put a survey together, who do we need to ask? Who is qualified to be asked? When I look at my hypothesis, I need to take an educated guess of what I think my outcome is going to be. In other words, what do I need to prove? I also want to keep my approach in simple language. We need to decide on the information we want. So what do we need to ask? How many questions should we have? How do we need to ask those questions? And what's the logic and flow that's required to do that survey? Then at the end, once we do our survey, how will we interpret the results, and what will we do to get those results? Can we get accurate information? And as a result, can we make better decisions? So you can see that whether we use formal processes or informal processes, we always need to be speaking with customers and getting feedback. That is absolutely essential in a business to move forward, because how else are we going to know what our customers like, need, and want? So that's our psychographic. Our ideal customer, we have to know what their behaviors are, what they're thinking, maybe their culture, how they process information, how they perceive our products and services. So those are the types of things that we want to get. So then we get into the different types of questions. So these are some samples. I went over a couple with the SurveyMonkey, but here's some from different software vendors. This one here is from SurveyMonkey. So this is called a Likert scale. So it's one selection to measure and understand a specific position. So how would you rate your experience with our product? So very satisfied, satisfied, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied, or neither agree or disagree. What I also like to put in surveys is I like to put a don't know. And most of the questions here don't show that. But when I design surveys, I will usually say don't know, because don't know is a response. I was in a workshop yesterday and somebody posted a question and they asked me a question that was impossible to answer because neither question suited exactly my position. So I didn't have enough options. So the best thing to do is have I don't know, or you don't answer it, then they know that you don't know. With SurveyMonkey, when you see the asterisk means that it's a required question. In other words, if I don't answer it, it won't let me go on to the next question. So you can see like little tricks of the trade. You can make some questions required. You can make some that are not required. Then we get into different questions like multiple choice. So for example, you want a survey to explore the overall selection options. So in this case, this came from Zoho.com. Please check all the specialty coffee drinks that you like. So maybe espresso latte, mocha, cappuccino, cafe au lait, cold brew coffee, and others. So now I'm doing I'm doing a survey on coffee and specialty coffees, and now I can sort of do a survey and find out what the most important are. If I were to survey 1,000 people and ask them what their favorites are, and it turned out that espresso was at the top of the list, like by far, maybe 75% of people wanted espressos, and only 13% or 10% wanted a cafe au lait. Well, guess what? My focus is going to be on the espressos. That's going to give me a lot of data to work forward. And now I can limit what I'm going to introduce to my clients. So why do I want to try to be everything to everyone when my surveys are telling me that I should lean on one? And then I can focus on making the best darn espresso in the world, or the best darn cafe au lait or mocha or whatever it is, right? So those are the reasons why we do surveys. This is a Likert scale again. It's a question with a numbered grading. So again, you can grade all your clients and you can actually do averages. And then the next one is like a weighted. This is weighted. So this is a weighted approach to determining what respondents value. So you're actually, if you're looking at a cafe, we're asking you to rank what's most important in your coffee dining experience. So what is it? So in this case, the client is saying spacious drinking environment is number one. If I have a nice environment and an enjoyable atmosphere, so again, well, it could be a different order. So for example, I might pick the variety of coffee flavors as what attracts me to this location or what have you. So again, it gives you valuable information that you can use. So be very, very strategic in terms of the types of questions that you might want to ask. This here is a yes or no question. What I like about yes or no's is that when we're doing a flow chart when we're doing a flow chart in a survey or a questionnaire, a yes or no is going to redirect us in one direction or the other. So if somebody says, do you have a computer? And I say no, then my response, and let's say I'm interviewing people who have computers. And if you say no, then my logic says, okay, well, I don't need to ask you the next question. Why would I do that? So my no question takes me to thank you and see you around. Right? That's the end of it. Whereas a yes question allows me to go into different levels of questioning, and it takes me through a flow of questions. And I'm going to actually, there's an importance to what questions you need to ask. I'm going to show you the types of questions and the order in which you must have them. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And this is a matrix style. So in this case, your matrix style means that we can talk about various topics in one chart. So basically, in this case, we're looking at the importance, like for example, user friendliness, the importance to a person, and then the satisfaction. So again, it's a multiple choice experience, but we're going to answer on each line for each of these different categories: importance and satisfaction. So this is from questionpro.com, right? So, and then the thing that you have to understand, and this is something that I understood a long time ago, when I've actually worked with companies and done formal surveys and questionnaires out in the public and whatever, I realized that in order to get an accuracy rate of 97%, I needed to do at least 1,100 surveys. Well, for most of us, that's a lot of surveys. And for people who are self-employed and have a small business, you don't have time for that potentially. But having said that, if you are going to cater to the masses, if you are going to have large audiences, if you are planning on scaling in the future, you might find a way to do this. And doing mail surveys or surveys on your website, etc., can be really important for you to get your number of samples up. But what I found is, I said earlier, I'm going to give you the 4 most important questions to ask and the order in which they have to be asked in. So by qualifying, this is a qualifying question, but by qualifying my audience right at the beginning, okay, so if I qualify my clients right at the beginning and I have a knockout question, for example, do you have a computer? And you say no, then that's a knockout question. I don't need to go through the rest of my survey with them. So by having the right audience, you will find that your margin of error will improve. It'll improve significantly. So this is just an example of large numbers, but at the same time, if I only have 100 clients and I sample them, by asking 100 clients, I'm 90% accurate, even with general questions. But I can get a better response or better accuracy rate if I can get the right qualified people. So for example, if I'm doing a computer survey and I just want Mac users. So I'll ask the question, do you have a Mac computer, or do you plan to have a Mac computer in the next 3 months? And it's a yes or no. If it's no, I say, thank you very much. Adios. It was nice talking to you. I mean, I don't put it in those words, but that's the message that I'm getting across. I end the survey. And then on the other hand, if I have a Mac user, now I can start out going to my next level of questions. So I'll get into that in a minute. So here's some example surveys. I already actually showed you on SurveyMonkey. So there's the link you can go to and see all the different types of surveys. Now, the one thing about surveys is that it's the flow, the knockout questions, etc. So you can see in this case, when we do a flow chart, you're asking, have you ever used this product? If it's a yes answer, you go to the next question. That's the flow. If it's a no answer, then you thank the client and you move on to the next one. So the point is that you can see that using logic, you can actually direct and get way more effective surveys. So for example, the next question after I said, yes, I've used the product, how likely are you to recommend a product to a friend or a colleague? Now you can see that if they answer 1 to 7, we can add logic to it. So if they answered 1 to 7, they weren't really that happy with it, or they wouldn't likely recommend, then I can actually ask the question, so to hear that, what can we do to improve? So you can see the logic. So that's the type of thing. You can do it formally. You can be talking to your client or your customer at a kiosk, and you can ask them, well, what do you like about the color of this jacket? And they might say, well, I prefer a red or whatever. You're getting valuable information just by asking questions. So it's extremely important to learn how to ask questions and survey people formally and informally. And by understanding the logic and using a survey flow, you can better understand how to deal with and develop rapport with customers and pull out the information that you need. So in this case, they might rank the product between an 8 and a 10. In that case, if you look at the top right-hand box, it says, awesome, thanks. Tell us why you feel that way. So now tell us how you feel that way is an open-ended question. It's not closed-end, it's an open-ended question. And it gives the respondent an opportunity to open up, and you can now start to see what's important and what's not important to that client. So this came from lucidchart.com. So that's just a sample of using logic. It's very difficult to show that. Usually when I'm doing in a class situation, I ended up doing flowcharts a mile long. But you need to flowchart your questions so that you can get the best information. So I mentioned earlier, what are the questions? What types of questions do we need to ask? And I'm telling you right now, learn to ask questions always in this order. You always start out with a qualifying question. With a qualifying question, I can get a yes or no answer, and I can, through my logic, I can knock a person out or I can keep them in the game. So that's the super most important thing about survey flow, is asking the qualifying question. If you're looking for a certain target audience, if I'm looking for, let's say, someone who's married or somebody who does do-it-yourself projects at home, that would be my qualifying question. Are you a do-it-yourselfer? Bang. It's either yes or a no. If it's a no, I might come back with a general question. That's the next level. And I might say, why aren't you, or I might ask some general questions and then I leave them alone, or I bring them back into that loop. So I run my flow questions by asking questions and then saying, okay, well, what am I going to do with the answers? If they answer yes, or they answer no, or they answer this, or they answer that, where do I go from there? So we start out with qualifying questions, then we move on to general. Once we've asked the general questions, now we can get into the specific stuff. And it's very rare that you ask personal questions in a survey. That's usually a no-no. You cannot ask a client, do you have a Visa card? That's personal. What's your phone number? That's personal. How many children do you have? That's personal, right? So you really need to develop trust in a survey, and you need to kind of work through it so that once you do get that trust, potentially you might need to ask those personal questions. However, sometimes a personal question is what you need to ask as a qualifying question. Okay, so yeah, so those are examples of flow charting and doing a survey. So I've got some resources and tips. So a couple of things I wanted to mention. There's just look, there's tons, there's many options in terms of different software companies that offer surveys, and they all have a different reason for being. They all have their strengths, they all have their weaknesses. However, this is an article put out by G2. I'm just going to go to this. So it talks about the matrix, and they rank their software by market presence, satisfaction level, and there's a matrix that shows contenders, leaders, niche products, and high performers. So this is a really valuable tool to potentially look at. There are others. When I do my market research, there's tons of data and information that you can get. But this particular site, I really liked it, and because it talks about the best survey software. And what's interesting is that in looking at different websites, it's got 370 listings. So what you want to look for is you want to look at whether it's easy to use, what the user satisfaction is. You can see that there's a lot of they've done their homework. I mean, they've used surveys to figure out, and rank different websites and whatever, what G2 users think. The only thing that I didn't like about the Google Workspace is that in some cases the logic doesn't work right. But at the same time, who am I to argue with a massive, this is a massive survey on 370 different lists. So if you look just on the right-hand side, there's a grid there with the different companies, and it actually shows Google Workspace in the top left-hand corner. You can see that. So that's the number one website. That's in terms of this grading model. Then we got Qualitrix. This one didn't even show up, but and then we got SurveyMonkey. So you can see that there's user satisfaction. There's 19th easiest to use in survey software. So you can see the ease of use, what the ranking is, who the best users are, the best industries, market segments. So in this case, SurveyMonkey is 35% small business and 35% mid-market. Google surveys, you can see how that's ranked. See, that's in the top right-hand quadrant where market presence is high and satisfaction rate is high. Now, if I go to the full grid, I'll just give you an example of the full grid here. And I'll press that. And you can actually see the placement of all these software companies. See that? So I've given you some samples from Zoho surveys, from Typeform, from Question Pro, from SurveyMonkey. So I actually selected some of the top software purveyors. And there's all these ones in the middle. Good heavens, there's hundreds of them basically. And this survey will actually take you through all 370 of them and have them ranked and tell you what's best for what type of business and what's easiest to use, etc. So I just thought I'd share that with you. So just exit from here for a moment. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Question Pro, I said that there was an actual website that has a free survey software, and Question Pro is absolutely awesome. The only problem with Question Pro is that if you do decide to go professional, it's like $100 a month. It's too expensive. But having said that, look at this free survey software. So you can go unlimited surveys, 100 question limit, not just 10 like SurveyMonkey. Now it's only good for one user, which is fine. And you're allowed up to 300 responses when you do a survey. So that's kind of cool because SurveyMonkey limits it to 10 questions and 100 responses. Plus, on top of that, you get 24/7 email and live chat support. Hello, for a free program? That's fantastic. So I'm only pushing this and mentioning this because there's really good value in terms of this particular software, and you can play around with it. The actual website is really detailed, has tons and tons of information, lots of training. So there's just to continue on here, there's 30 question types. You can actually customize the surveys in different colors. You can add your logo. There's navigation. You can do customized branding. You can export your data. So when you do a survey, and you can do that with SurveyMonkey too, but after you do a survey that's on Question Pro, you can actually download it to your Excel spreadsheets as CSV files, which is great because now you can use that data for other applications. It also integrates with Google Sheets. It has skip logic, which I love. It has a question and answer piping. It contains basic statistics and it gives you basic quotas. So it actually helps you to leverage your strategic planning and get the best answers. So I thought I'd put in a couple of tips for using surveys. So like I said earlier, when you talk to a client that calls you or goes to your website or whatever, always ask them, how'd you hear about us? Or where'd you get my number? Or where did who told you about us or whatever? Track it. It's super important. I was in a different kind of business with my wife in the past, and we used to ask that question all the time. And we were spending hundreds of dollars per month on promotion and advertising. And by asking that simple question all the time, and by measuring the results of our marketing efforts, etc., we were able to save a lot of money on advertising because we could actually turn on, turn off different media markets or media communication channels. So it's very important to find out how people are hearing about you, where they're hearing you from. And another thing too, and I know it just sounds like a really simple thing, but I actually managed a business with 95 staff, and I just used a simple calendar format. The 30-day calendars, like a 30-day calendar, 30 days to one-page calendar. And you could track the number of calls, the number of sales, the number of clients, what your average check is, any events that you're having, so you can mark down what's going on. In the business that I was working in, it was a seasonal business, so we had to track weather because that was extremely important. And we would also track the number of clients that came through the venue, so that we weren't the only venue, but there were other people, so we wanted to know how many people were coming through the venue. So instead of contact us on a website, this is another one. I'm going to show you something that's really cool. Instead of contact us on a website, you can qualify clients with a survey to provide more information before you actually speak to them. So I'll show you how. So here's a little program called Calendly. Okay, so with Calendly.com, you can actually have a free account, but the problem is that you can only have one event. In my case, I have hundreds of events, so I create these in a few minutes just for clients that are interested in knowing how to develop rapport with clients. So in this case, this is for a website service provider, and instead of having a oh, I'm going to the last page. Hang on now. Sorry, I'm going to go right to the page. I linked that in incorrectly. My apologies. Case, we've done a lot. Okay. So with Calendly, what you can do is you can have a link from your website directly to your client. You can figure out what your clients are looking for. And so in this case, maybe I provide website services. So I find a time to book. So 4:30 Wednesday, September 20th. Now watch what happens. I'm gonna collect some extremely valuable data about my client, and I'm gonna find out whether they're serious enough or not. This is way better than having a name and an email, and we'll call you back, because you don't have a clue what they're looking for. Another disadvantage of having a little thing, contact us, on your website, and you just have a phone number and a name that you're collecting, guess what? If they are in the mood to buy, they're probably looking at you. And if they're not getting a response right away, they're looking at your competitors. And they don't know how professional you are. And if you get back to them in a week from now because you're too busy, or whatever, you've gone on vacation, you're going to be out of luck, because in this case, you pick a time. So watch what happens. You pick a time, and so you put in your name, you put in your email. I can flick through and see what's going on here. Now, in this case, what industry or business are you planning this website for? I'm collecting extremely important data. I'm finding out about my customer. I'm going to know exactly what position they're in at this point in time. Plus, they're booking a time on my schedule. If I'm on vacation for a week, it's not going to be available as a time. But at least my client is at ease, because they'll get a follow-up email. Thank you for making an appointment with us. They'll get if I put in my phone number, my text, they'll get a reminder 3 hours before. They can choose whether they want to get a phone call, go to me. I can use almost any way, like I can use Zoom, like any way that we can communicate. So I'm asking, do you currently have a website? Yes or no? So if they have a website, I don't know what they're familiar with and not familiar with. I don't know if they just have a landing page. I don't know what it is that they're looking for. But if they don't have a website, then I have to provide some education to them, right? Now I've got an answer to a question. Now what I'm going to ask them is, how complex would you like your website to be? So choose one. So a simple intro page with basic contact information, a showcase website with multiple pages, an interactive website without e-commerce and shopping tools, an interactive website including e-commerce, or I don't know, I'd like to know about my options. So I've given the client many different options, and when they answer that and make an appointment with me, I now know what information I need to prepare before I start talking to them. So here's a really sort of informal way and a great way to introduce yourself to a client using a survey process. And then this can show the client the scope and the depth of the work that I might want to offer. So for example, it says, do you think you might also be interested to discuss any of the following? Logo and branding. Well, guess what? That's not my specialty, but I have a partner. I have somebody that I can refer to do logos and branding. Do they want hosting and mailboxes? Well, I don't do that either, but I have somebody that I can turn you on to. So basically what I'm doing is I'm saying, listen, we can be a one-stop shop for you. And maybe we don't offer everything, but at least if I know what you're looking for, I can prepare for my meeting. So I don't know if you see that as a plus or a minus, but it's a great way to communicate with clients. So just using a survey, and yeah, so it's a very valuable tool. So you can see, look at this: product photography, payment portals, e-commerce, live chat, internal links, call to action features, social media icons, development of social media marketing, analytical tools, SEO optimization, or web marketing services, service package offers, and payment plans. What I'm doing is I'm putting in your mind that maybe you just want a basic website, but you never thought about all that stuff. And what happens is a lot of people don't realize that websites can cost $5,000, $20,000, $100,000, depending on how fancy or how complex you want to go. Most people that are just starting out and putting a website together, they think it's really easy. They have a friend that's going to help them or what have you. So what I want to do is I want to show the complexity, but I don't want to do it in a threatening way. So now I can start looking at my options. I can speak with my client and get way better results we can get way better results. So going back to you got to find ways to engage with your clients no matter what. So in summary, okay, survey use and planning, you should always be surveying. You should always be asking your clients questions. At the end of the day, you want your ideal client. Your ideal client is your psychographic. It's the habits. It's the way they think. It's what they want and need. So if you can address those, you're gonna build your business. No two ways about it. We're not talking about geography. We're not talking about demographics. We're talking about your ideal client. So always be surveying. It's direct client data and it's fact-based. So doing your own questioning is really primary market research. I can get lots of secondary research and I can guess at what I want to do. But at the end of the day, I need the primary client data. I need to find out, why do you want to use me for your product or service? And the other thing too is that it's easy to collect. It's easy to collect, and you can be flexible in terms of your approach. So we can use formal and informal approaches. So we really need to understand our clients and we need to develop those relationships. That's key. At the end of the day, all we want is to develop relationships with clients so that we can bring value to them. And we'll bring the greatest value to them if we know what it is that they want. So really, surveys are really good for, it's the best tool for strategic planning. No ifs, ands, or buts. So thank you.